All right. Bot's already in, so yeah, whatever. I am Pex, the Tavern Custodian. I help run things here at the tavern and do shows like these podcasts for when people are absent. Cough, cough.
I'm Smunchy. I'm the owner of Smunchy Games. Yeah.
My name is Courtney. I run the blog Hack and Slash. I broadcast as Agonarch artist on Twitch. Please, follow my links, support me, and help me reach my goal of continuing to live indoors.
I am Will Esgro. I'm games director at Smunchy Games, and I host Table Crashers on Geekspiel, which is a board game interview and rule teach for games that are either going on Kickstarter, have been on Kickstarter, or good friends of ours. Excuse me. And I also am a part of one soon-to-be multiple RPG live streams on Twitch. The one I'm on right now is on Time to Tabletop with Scooter.
So which one of these lovely topics do we want to start off with?
Oh, Todd didn't go.
Yeah, Todd.
Oh, Todd, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm Todd. I help out here on the tavern. I also run Hex Press. I will drop links to my YouTube channel. I'm kind of redoing my blog, so it's a little bit dead there right now, but hopefully I'll relaunch it with a better design soon and get that going as well. Now, on to the topics.
Well, since I was an asshole, Todd, you pick.
First choice, gosh, psychology seems really complicated. How about hex crawling? That's always a favorite of mine.
Well, I've never run a Hexcrawl campaign, but I have books and I want to at some point. Yes, that's right.
Why does it have to be a campaign? How have you played D&D and not had exploring hexes be a part of that?
Well, we use squares.
Yeah, very often you see squares
for the travel.
Yes.
I don't understand. You're going to have to explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay, so there's a grid that's a square map instead of a hex map, and yeah.
No, for the overworld though, right?
Yeah, for the world or setting map.
I guess my first thing is it's not a pedantic question, right? Like hex crawling simply refers to the overworld travel procedures, and whether they're hexes or squares is sort of irrelevant, right? You've at some point had to move from one location to another location several hundred miles away in a D&D game, right?
Correct.
What did you do? That's hex crawling.
I mean, so I understand what you guys are saying. In more like, I would see that happening in a lot of like more advanced campaigns. A lot of map stuff that I've been involved in is usually, and granted, I'll admit limited RPG experience here, but TTRPG experience, but a lot of it, like the map stuff, has been in mind. A lot of story based stuff and a lot of theater of the mind when we're doing any type of movement. Like it might just be a picture of a map, and then the GM will point, here's where you're going.
Well, when you say you don't have many experience, you mean just like 1 or 2 decades?
I'd say it's a few sessions across 2 decades. So yeah, it's a spread, but not a ton of experience in terms of I never really drilled deep into it. So
right, and from my reading on it, it's more of the random encounters along the way during the hex crawl. For me, it's more of the random encounters in the location once you get there. It's more like story. Okay, we moved X 100 or X 1,000 miles. Maybe 1 or 2 things happened along the way, but
my question
was,
didn't you guys follow the rules? Like there's super explicit rules in OD&D and first edition Dungeons and Dragons for the procedures involved in. No, you didn't, huh? I just
no.
All right then. Now I know where we're at.
I was a part of. We're hyper casual. My first group was honestly in the college dorm setting, and we were just chilling, having a good time. One of the NPCs was actually solid chocolate messenger boy. It was Christmas time, and also Go ahead.
Let me just say, in regards to hex crawls, that if you follow the
Yeah.
rules in the book, it's quite fun.
Okay.
So I will rephrase. When I play a game where I follow the rules, I have books that I like to play with that.
Where'd you go, Pex?
Here?
He's here. He just cut off for a second.
Oh, sorry. I have books and resources I want to use with that are specifically like Hexcrawl, like the Hexcrawl Chronicles I have, and the Land of Nod are some ones I want to dive into, but they're on the back burner for me personally. I'm finishing up some Mystara campaign stuff at the moment.
Well, it's part of how the game is structured, I believe. Like the idea is that the players can do whatever they want, and if they want to go from one place to another, or maintain a domain, or seek adventure, hex crawling is the procedure via which that's accomplished. And I think it's not like when I set up a campaign, I don't have a plan for what the players are going to be doing. They get to choose, and if they choose to travel, that's what it's there for, right?
Yeah.
I say yeah.
All I was gonna say is I haven't done a hex crawl in a very long time. Probably almost 15 years now. The last time I did one, just because I think what ended up happening is as the shift over time in RPGs, I think it maybe became like too complicated. I don't know, for a lot of people, but because it is so like open ended, right? Um, Unlike the theater of the mind aspect and like this linear campaign, I felt like the hex crawl was really like open world based, essentially, and you could kind of go and move your pieces, right? I mean, that of course, though, as Courtney mentioned, that was the old school rules, really.
I think it also has to do with people where in a lot of gaming, random encounters kind of fell out of vogue. The idea that everything is plot based or everything is pushing your narrative forward. Things that didn't fit that criteria,
That always struck
things
me.
that weren't like that.
That always struck me as so strange. Yeah, it's so strange. Why would you? Life is not like if every possible thing that can happen is tied into one central thing. That seems rather one-dimensional.
Right now, but see, the funny thing is, I think you're going from a mechanics-driven, RPG mind to the new evolution that sort of sprung up over the past, I'd say decade, and especially now in modern tabletop RPGing. I know I'll call it that. I'm not sure if you can really make a distinction, but where it's story and plot based, and usually the DMs have this, like you said in your description, a one-dimensional view, which is funny because a story isn't always viewed as one-dimensional. But there's this plot line in that dungeon master's mind in many cases, in the modern role-playing world, where they've written out this sort of story, and there's like the perfect ending, but then they branch it themselves as they're telling it via their players.
Yeah, I just my brain just exploded, and I don't know if I'm completely in the wrong here, but I have to wonder. You are talking about a thing that is not in the text of 5e. Like, if you read 5e, there are suggestions, there are descriptions, but it is very clearly a game with rules and procedures. And if somebody wants to ignore those and say that they're going to do something else, that's fine. But I don't understand how it's relative to the play of Dungeons Dragons. Like it's very explicit in, I don't know, maybe people are just playing without perusing the texts or whatever, but it's there. It says,
right.
The players choose what they're doing. Your job is to have people in this environment and be an impartial arbiter. And here are some suggestions for how to manage the flow of that. And it's very explicit. And when people are like, well, they're talking about something. I mean, this is a D&D podcast. Am I in the right place?
Absolutely. But again, I think, the adage different strokes for different folks comes in, especially within the realm of role playing in many, many cases.
I think just because something happens doesn't mean that it's a positive.
Well, I think people all along have ignored rules that they don't want to use. I mean, I don't know anybody who played first edition using all the rules in the DMG. It would have just been overload, so you always pick and chose what fit for you. So people tend to look at the things that they want to look and emphasize those, and then there's stuff that they don't like and they de-emphasize them or remove them completely. So people who don't want to do hex crawling or in any way, just kind of hand wave. Okay, you get on your horses, and 3 days later you arrive at the next place, and they just go
Right.
on from there.
Yep.
Those are nice roads. I'd like to have a campaign that has roads that are that safe.
I have to say, I love how triggered you are, hack and slash, at this right now.
I don't know, triggered. I like had a very strong sensation in my frontal lobe that felt like fireworks going off. I mean, like, are we doing a thing? If I show up to play Twister and they're like, okay, the first thing you have to do is, pontificate about your opinions on Marx. I'd be like, wait, what? Like, I'm here to spin the dial and put my thing on a red thing, and you're telling me something that I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, and I think, I think at the heart, this touches on the psychology stuff a little bit. But at the heart, I mean, you learn in a certain way in this game, in the way you play the game, and I'm going to say the right way. But it's really there's definitely a difference between the ways that play is organized within Dungeons and Dragons, within many systems that are out there right now, and very often it's very loose to the actual rules that are in the book.
And what I would say is I'm not so much against people, picking and choosing stuff, because obviously they're going to do that anyway. What I wish sometimes, and this sort of brings it back to hex crawling, I find oftentimes people have jettisoned these things without actually really trying them.
Yes.
So like, people say like, "Oh, I don't do this," but I'm like, "Well, have you tried it?" No, I didn't. I just read this. Yeah. And my thing is, try it, see how the rules work, see how you like it, and then decide. Don't just get rid of it on, a theoretical idea of what it might be.
Right, and to my point, I'm not against Hexcrawl. I just haven't had an opportunity to do it in the fashion that Hack and Slash is talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, Todd, I might have run a first edition game where all the rules were used. That might have been my table for a couple of years.
That would have made my head explode. Just weapon speeds and all that stuff. I would have thrown my hands up.
Because that's like, I mean, and I'd say I'm probably one of the youngest here in the room, and actually I had preferred doing D&D 1, like going through all those speeds and things when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because when I just got back into RPGs not even 4 years ago. Now, to be fair, at heart, I'm a storyteller, but when I found out that, like 5e amongst other RPGs didn't do hex crawling anymore, I wasn't sure how to react because I was used to that as well. And I was like, okay, here's an open world map. This is what we're doing. And then I started my game that I was creating paths. And I was like, okay, we're going to have threat. And we're going to have all this other stuff. And everyone's like, why? And I'm like, what do you mean, why? I'm like, that's how the game's been played forever. And then I was like, oh, things have changed. And that was just me being me.
I think if you spend enough time with the first edition books, you begin to, like, you mentioned weapon speeds, but weapon speeds, it's pretty explicit that they're only to be used when in comparison with other melee combatants who have weapons. Like, a lot of the systems only come into play when they're relevant, right? Like armor versus,
that is true.
Weapon versus armor type is only relevant in man-to-man combat.
No doubt. I mean, I was exaggerating a little bit, but like my point was that, like, there's a lot of rules in there, and I think a lot of people, even back in the day, skipped a fair amount depending on their table, But
for sure they did.
For me, I run a very expedition heavy play by post game, so I'm all about kind of the hex crawling rules, and I don't find they have a lot of overhead, and I think also they maybe get a bad rap a bit because people have house ruled so much of it. So one of the things that turn people against random encounters, they happen so frequently and they take up some time, they don't really mean anything. But if you go back to, say, the OD&D wilderness encounter rules, you're only rolling once a day per day of travel. It's once, so it's not like you're getting tons of encounters that are going to slow things down considerably. But then I look online and you have all kinds of people who have house rolled that, so rolling for every hex, rolling for every whatever. And I'm sure, of course, when you bend the rules for what you think is a better game, you're creating an environment that's going to have more of it. And if that's the table you played at, then maybe you walk away from that game going, man, that was too much of a thing. So I want to, get rid of it. But when you go back to the original rules, they weren't nearly that severe as far as how it worked. It's actually fairly simple and easy.
That's actually a good point. So, how would you? I mean, we talk on the side of like players who drop rules, um, to make it easier for groups in their own mind or to push their narrative. Um, what about on the other side where people add rules in to overcomplicate, make a little point salad? Do you guys see that happen a lot within your groups or things you've experienced?
I don't see those games lasting for very long. I mean, they happen, sure, but like long running games are run by people who are playing a game and have just
Right.
made some house rules that affect the flow. I think like lots of people do that, but then are they running 4-year campaigns with it or 3-year
Right.
campaigns or whatever? Like maybe, I don't know, probably not.
Yeah, it's something I read about more online in people's games that I've actually experienced myself. But you get people who will look at things and say, "Oh, this is too easy, so I have to goose up the challenge." But often, that thinking, sometimes there are errors with it. Sometimes it's just, again, they're basing it on their single experiences, and so they feel like that they need to do that. But yeah, when you
Right.
add extra weight to those systems, sometimes it can start to drag. But then
Well,
it's
I mean,
not
it's a
really the
conflict.
system, but the thing.
Right, it's a conflict because they tell, like, a large part of DMing is managing the flow and the pace of the game, but
Mhm.
the idea is that you do it within the spirit of the rules to provide a challenge to the players playing, and it's very difficult. Like, if you've played a lot of war games, you know exactly what you mean, right? You and your opponent aren't interested in winning so much as you are using the war game to, simulate the outcome of a battle or whatever, so you can talk
Right.
together about what outcome should be. Whereas, it's not true if you're not familiar with that. How do you describe that to somebody who doesn't do it regularly? And so they get this advice, make it fun for your players, but then they get this advice, follow the rules. And how do you communicate to somebody what the line is there?
Absolutely. And again, now, I mean, I imagine you've all led groups within this chat here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. So where do you guys gauge that? Do you guys have like a session 0 or even before a session 0? Do you like lay out your guidelines for your groups?
Yes.
Yeah, it's usually a half a page to a page at max.
That's a lie. House rules run for more pages than that, I promise you.
For you,
I was gonna say Hack and Slash has got to have like a novelization with
it's got like a packet.
I wrote a game. It was easier to do that, like write the whole game. Russ Nicholson did some illustrations for it. Like, it's serious business. Check it out. It's called Perdition.
No, I mean, and that's excellent. Is it a democratic process for you guys when you're setting up groups? Like, is it like a hard line? This is how I run this, and if you don't like it,
it's democratic.
opens the door.
I'm hanging out with my friends. Well, I'm not an autocrat with them when I'm not playing D&D. Why would I turn into one during the game?
It's a pextatorship.
Yep.
I think with the current game I'm running, I think I just started out vanilla, and just as situations came up, I would talk to everybody about, hey, does this sound interesting to you? It adds this, but maybe change that a little bit, and then we give it a test drive, and then eventually we just give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But it tended to be stuff. I like stuff that kind of empowers the players, but adds extra risk, so that you could try something which will give you this little extra, but there's this extra risk attached. So it tended to be the kind of things that I would house rule in. I think maybe there may be the odd case where there wasn't a mechanic for drowning, and I just was like, okay, here's in case anyone ends up drowning again, here's how we'll handle it. How does that sound? Kind of thing. But that's how I tend to do it.
Okay.
I get feedback from all of them. This is how I'd like to do the rule. Does anybody have any opinions or different ways to want to do it? But the ultimate decision would be mine at the end of it. And so it's a weird sort of democracy, but final says with me, so it's not a democracy.
It's a tyranny.
Yeah, pretty much. I roll with an iron fist.
You drown. Oh well. No.
Everybody in my world has lead feet.
Right.
I'm gonna throw this in here because I always find it interesting. How do you guys handle the comedic player? I think all of us have that one player that shows up that takes the game semi seriously. Where do you guys draw the line? And how do you handle it? I can tell you personally, like I've usually handled it in a way where I put a lot of pressure on them in an encounter, or a goofy decision that they're most likely going to make is going to punish them in some way within the game. How do you guys handle that?
I think D&D is inherently absurd. I mean, like the girdle of masculinity, femininity, the puns, use fleece in the illusion spell, like, or all the spell components are all jokes. Like I believe
Right.
that it is inherently absurd, but that because you're playing a game, it doesn't matter that you're fighting a gummy golem. It matters that it just did 47 points of damage to you, and your fighter can't take another hit. Like it's so serious, like the consequences of the actual game, that I don't think it matters how absurdist it is. So I don't mind. I mean, it's a game. We should be having fun. I don't mind the humor or whatever.
But I mean, I think there's a difference between tongue in cheek, and then there's just that guy, the guy that goes completely overboard in a session. Again, this was my experience, because obviously there, like you said, you're right. The system itself creates that tension and creates that, brings it back to, hey, it's a gummy boss, but it almost killed me. But
I just use real consequences in the game, and the party will tend to self-regulate a bit. If somebody's being too goofy and it's causing them all kinds of troubles or whatever, then they'll do that. And then if the player really just can't stop and the party's getting frustrated, then maybe it's not the right, group for them. And I don't really mind the comedic stuff, but if they're going to do it, then they do it. And, if
and they pay.
Nasty,
what I find happening. Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're 100% correct, Todd. That's 100% correct. Yes.
What I find happening more often than just the single chucklehead is everybody trying to one-up each other on the one joke that just happened in the game. That I find that more of a nuisance than the one-off we're talking about. And usually it's just, come on guys, let's get back to it, or roll initiative. That usually shuts them up too.
The second you say roll initiative, it's like, oh, things just got real.
It's not funny anymore. It's not funny.
Yeah, I used to play in a group, and I would use it now, but I'm playing play by post, so it doesn't make sense. But they would use a sand timer, and so if things started to go on, the sand timer would come on, and we knew that, if it wasn't settled by the time the timer ran out, then bad things would happen. So we'd hit that joke, maybe get a laugh, and then back to business.
Our group has flights of fancy. They got an apprentice, like one of the proficiencies in axe lets you have a familiar, and so the guy got a vulture and he gave it camel training, and so there's this running joke about the vulture taking so like flights of absurdity or whatever, but they create the reality of the world. You're having fun with your friends. I wouldn't want to shut that down if people are laughing or having a good time, right?
And we've all been in that moment where the table breaks us and we're in this laughing fit and we can't stop. And everybody's laughing. It's causing the other person to laugh because they're laughing. And it's just an endless cycle that goes on for 10, 15 minutes. But I do think those are good times at the table. And those are times we remember the longest, or some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the life is absurdist and surrealistic, right? And we're not doing anything more than going on a dream quest to retrieve knowledge when we're playing D&D. And so that's also kind of inherently absurdist. So of course, I mean, like that's going to happen. Everybody breaks down, and it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to your point of the things we remember, this is kind of one of the reasons why I've gone away from wanting or really enjoying having really elaborate plots, is that they don't tend to be the things that we remember from games. I don't remember the plots of almost all the games. Maybe I remember moments. There might have been a climactic moment I remember, but I couldn't tell you the plots. I just remember all either the great or terrible things that happened to us, or the very funny stuff, or those are the things that are memorable to me, not the super plotted adventure that we actually took.
Yeah, right.
I don't know about anybody else, but has that been forced on us because of the media we read or watch these days? Like, we must play it this kind of way in order to run a proper game in all serious fashion.
Well, you know what? That's actually, I was going to actually transition and ask a question related to that. What if we have a pretty good capture point of people in here? What are your thoughts on the modern media movement with Twitch and YouTube Live and Facebook, where not only are your average players and groups streaming, but also what seems to be heavily scripted stuff is being put out there too, and just it's all about the production value and perfected chemistry between characters and stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you guys see this going?
I think that the present is the degeneracy of the past writ large, and there's some Greek out there who's still very angry that we're using writing. So cool for the new stuff.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the only problem I have is sometimes people either feel like their game should live up to these ones. Like I get people who I've seen online just really upset that their game isn't living up to what Critical Role is, or
Right.
some other one. And I have to remind people, hey, these guys are actors. They're doing it for now. It's I'm sure that it's a money making venture for them. They're
Right.
their motives and everything for doing things. Like I wish people could play like that and play like it was more of an improv thing where you're playing for the joy of the group and not your own personal goals. A lot of times with players who maybe do things for their own kind of more selfish gain at the cost of other members of their party. But that's
Right.
also not realistic to how most table games are. So you can't look at Critical Role and say, wow, my game should be like that, or some of these other ones where you say like, why isn't my game like that? Because the universe of games is obviously very diverse, and it's going to be more imperfect than these productions that are aiming to show sort of the best ideal of what a certain type of game are. Might make some people might put undue expectations on people for how games for most people in the real world are played.
I mean,
You
right?
don't have
Like,
thespian actors at your table? What?
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Pex. It's the exact same thing. It's like, oh, you mean the professionally produced D&D game filled with actors was more impressive than your home game?
Weird.
But
What are the
go on
chances?
Reddit, you'll see people talking about that, like, hey, this happens in Critical Role. Why isn't this happening for me? Or why can't my people be more like theirs? And it's like, yeah, there are obvious
Interesting.
reasons, but people still get
Because that
this
guy's an
idea of-
insurance adjuster.
Right. Professional voice actor. Yeah,
And I think
but it's a real thing.
what's tied into that as well is I know Mercer is splitting away from Geek and Sundry to bring that more genuine tabletop experience back and sort of drop the acting and the writing behind the scenes. Do you think that was a good move? Do you think?
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
gonna-
Mercer has the heart of the game in his soul, for sure.
Right.
I think
I think
as
there's
long
a
as
place for
people
both.
go ahead.
Sorry, Pex, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. As long as people don't take it like as the word of God when they watch or read an article or read some Twitter post that this is the way D&D has to be. It's written in stone. If you break away with that, you're just playing the game wrong. No, you're not. I'm sorry. You're playing the game to make your table happy, and however it works for your table, it's not going to work at another table. It's just not. It's when people get that absurd, this is how you must do it. That's what it gets. That's what triggers me.
Yeah.
Don't read my blog, man.
I love reading your blog. It makes me giggle.
I think a lot of people actually like. I feel like the blogs that are most popular are the ones that take a more dogmatic approach to this is how the game is, as opposed to the more.
Oh, absolutely. But on both sides. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
Polarizing content is what people read. I mean, you're not going to read somebody who talks about like the middle of the road look on something or stance. You're going to go at the person who is like hardline one way or hardline the other. That's what's entertaining.
But yeah, as far as the media stuff goes, I think that the one thing right now which is good is unless you just watch one thing like Critical Role, there's a lot of different streams and things and videos you can watch, and they're all various quality. So at least if you kind of do a broad search, you can see a lot of different games and a lot of things and see how different types of games people run. Obviously, some people are going to run things very rules light. Some people are going to very, very rules heavy, theater of mind versus grid. And you can really, and just quality of play, you can really see a lot if you do go and check it out. And it's nice that people can go and do that. I had a friend of ours, I think she's 13 or whatever, her friends are playing D&D, so she started asking me about it because she knows I'm into this kind of thing. And I was like, yeah. And I said, maybe we could play one time, and you could also, go online and look. And if you're curious to be how it is before we have a chance to play, then, look online and check out some streams, and you can kind of at least get a general idea of how the game is. And I think that's great. I wish there would have been stuff like that, years ago, obviously, but the technology wasn't there.
You know what's fascinating to me, because I'm looking at some of our topics here, because you have board game development on here. I want to know what happened between like this modern board game boom, where you have something like Gloomhaven. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Gloomhaven. I know Will has.
Oh yeah, it's great. I have
Um,
a copy. It's a fantastic game for sure. It's good.
Right.
Yeah,
So
Gloomhaven falls into a weird place for me. I played it once. It just seemed like it seemed like too much of a. I almost was like I could. It was like the game I was wishing like why don't we just play a role playing game instead of Gloomhaven?
Right.
Yeah, it's
But
it's a tactics game with a campaign engine over it, but it's clearly a card based tactics game. Yeah.
Well, see, and that's why like hex crawling, right? Where that's like the topic we were just talking about. That's pretty much Gloomhaven, like almost in a nutshell, minus the massive
Can I
map.
disagree with you more strongly than I know how to put into words?
Than I've ever done
Go
before.
Go ahead.
That was the entirety of my statement. I just flat out think you're wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, I bring it up because I still feel like hex crawling had more of a board game feel to it than a lot of the modern RPGs, and I'm wondering what the thought is behind that.
Oh, okay. So that's why we disagree, because I don't know if you've read older versions of D&D. I mean, I'm teasing you there. Of course you have. That they say, the player characters have a turn and they get to move so many squares in a turn. And then the DM has procedures that they follow, and it's played, they used miniatures on a grid. I mean, like it is in fact a game structured so that we pretend there is a board as the players play it, which is why, it's the same with hex crawling, is that if you take your piece out of the dungeon, then you're simply moving your piece on a different board. And the great thing about D&D is that the boards weren't limited by what the designer told you, but the environments, the gameplay could be anything, and you weren't trapped on it and you could move beyond the board. But the explicit structure is very mechanical for all of those things. It's the purpose behind Gygax's admonishment that the time records must be kept in order for a meaningful campaign, because the movement and the costs for all the choices the players might make wouldn't be accounted for if you didn't keep track of like the progress and how long it would take them.
Yeah, and hey, look, at the very beginning, the first, Zero Edition, the white box, they were like, hey, you could also use this outdoor survival board game, for
exactly as the map
for that
right?
element. That was the map. That a lot all the first campaigns, their maps was that outdoor survival map, and they would place their cities and their dungeons on there, and then they would move around it. So it definitely has a board game like feel. And I've seen people who run their games. I think I've reading on some of the different ones that have play-by-post you can run, and they run them very board game like, where the GM will write, okay, turn 6, this is what happens. Okay, turn 7, this is what happens. Turn 8, so they would run it like that. So there's definitely a lot of crossover with the way the game was originally run and board games.
That's how I play. Like I mark turns. The players take an action, and every so often 10 minutes pass, and that time. That exchange is, and I mean, like I mark it though. They have like a turn tracker so that we can keep track of all the things that are occurring while they're in the dungeon. It also helps me keep track of the things that they're not directly interacting in, what they're doing too, like all the other active agents on the board, right? Because that's the exciting thing. It's not a board game where it's static. It's a board game where, there's another creative person behind the scenes trying to make an interesting situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I use a turn tracker behind the scenes. I think I usually just tell them 10 minutes pass. But this guy was actually explicitly, and maybe like you were just saying, like, hey, you've been 8 turns in the dungeon.
Yeah, I show it to my players. It generates lots of anxiety. It's a great, you just mark off a square and they're like, hey!
Yeah, I think when they know that random encounter check is coming in one more turn, but they're trying to figure out how to open a chest or something, it really makes the decision. I think that's one of the big things that I feel like is lost with the newer editions, is getting away from the time costs, and what that means and the kind of decisions that does, whether it's you're running out of food, whether it's you're running out of light, whether you're just running out of time, because or you're going to be rolling the dice with random encounters. That time is like a constant element, but it's been slowly de-emphasized in the way the game has run, whether it's giving everybody dark vision or people just kind of shrugging off and just saying, well, torches are infinite and lanterns are infinite and I don't care about that, it's whatever. But what's lost in there is that tension that comes for when you're ticking off those time, and that you're spending a lot of time, and what that means in either in the outdoors or in the dungeon.
I want to be clear that there is a completely different style of play, the adventure path, and it can have open areas or, like sandbox-like elements, and it is a completely valid way to play. And I'm not casting any aspersions on that. My claim is that it's simply inferior and that the other way is more fun.
So, to sort of tie psychology loosely into what we're discussing tonight, because I do have a background in that and mainly research psychology, but when you guys form up as players and you create your characters, how much of your time is spent, on developing that background? Is it done as you're building the character, stat wise, mechanically, or do you, like, for example, do ideas you have about your character lead to decisions you make for the stats and the way you design it, or is it something that develops after you've built the character and you enter the story with your DM?
I mean, for me, I usually roll up my stats, and if we're playing old school and I'm just doing everything down the line, then that always comes first, and then I look at what I've got, and once I've kind of finished what I've got, I see how that sort of molds what I'm going to play. I'm kind of a proponent of, I think backstory oftentimes is very overrated. I don't really like to write a lot of backstory. I don't really enjoy for players a lot of backstory, because I feel like the adventure is what's going to come. It's not what's behind what's
Right.
behind me. So I don't really worry too much about that. I don't even like, and I'm definitely one of those guys that, like, I look at my guy, okay, he's a dwarf. All right. So I'm like, okay, I'm a dwarf. Where's the nearest dwarf village? He's from there. He wanted to make some money, so he's out doing this. And then as the adventure comes, that's where I want my story to come from, and not from some kind of past. I think to me that's not important.
I think Spunchy was saying earlier that he doesn't remember the plots. He remembers the events. I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but it's the same thing as nobody remembers the 2-page backstory you wrote. They remember what you do in play. My group is fond of second edition, and so you do kind of have to come up with a concept because of the non-weapon proficiency system and everything. So I think you can come up with an idea, but I don't think anything that is outside of what occurs in play I ever really consider part of my character, right?
Interesting.
Well, I know in a lot of modern games, people, 5th edition, whatnot, people take great pride in enjoying their backstories, and that's fine. That's the way their games are, and a lot of times
the girls love the tieflings. They're very fond of that class.
Well, let's look at it this way: 100 years now,
I like tieflings. Come on.
Everybody likes tieflings.
Go ahead,
let's look at it this way: 100 years from now, we're all dead. Is anybody going to play the same way we play today?
Dude, I'm not going to be dead 100 years from now. I don't know what you're talking about. We got life extension going on. I'll be here.
Except for the AI over there that's called Skynet or Hack and Slash.
You know what? In 100 years, 4th edition will be the new OSR. Everyone will be wanting to go back and play 4th edition.
Dude,
and
there's no way. It's a bad game. It's a bad game. Like I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not edition warring. We played it when it came out for 18 months, and it is just not well designed. It's not fun. It has all kinds of mechanical and math problems. It leads to really unimaginative and tedious play. I do not think there will ever be a 4th edition renaissance. They might make another good tactics game, but the game itself has some good ideas, but the implementation was terrible.
Look what
So
you
here's
did.
what I would say.
Look what you did.
I felt like Gloomhaven is the 4th edition Renaissance, because I felt like when I was playing that one, that things were a little bit different, but that was like, wow, if Wizards had either been more forward thinking or whatnot, that basically 4th edition with some tweaks could have been Gloomhaven. That's how I felt. And I played a lot of 4th edition. So.
Yep, I agree with that too.
I'm going to call out Melkor in chat does say it's sad, but there's already signs of 4th edition Renaissance.
You beat
Well,
it.
I don't think that's sad. If they can
now.
make it something fun.
Well, I know there is I forget what it's called, but there is someone who's made a 4th edition clone, and maybe they fixed some of the issues. I just didn't. My big thing with 4th edition was I didn't like some of the things. It's funny. I love a lot of the mechanical things in the older games, like with hexcrawling and whatnot. But I don't care for. A lot of people love skill challenges. I don't like that. I felt like it was sort of look at my sheet and then try to munge it to fit. Like, how can I use history to jump across this chasm? Like, I didn't love that so much. but I forgot even where I was going to go with that. But I think that there were. Oh, the other thing I didn't like was everything seemed to be in the same way. Like everyone had these kind of same. I remember the first time a guy who loved to play wizards and loved to be like 200 feet back, floating and invisible, and that was how they played. There was now they couldn't get away from like 60 feet because everything had been moved into this one. Basically, everyone being on the battle mat, and everybody had the same kind of bursts, and everybody had the same feeling. And I felt like I could change classes, but the powers kind of all were fitting in the same patterns, which just made every class feel kind of samey to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's a good overview of some things that are wrong with 4th edition.
But some people like that because I'll get people with 5th edition. All they want to talk about is the balance. How balanced are each class at every level? How balanced is encounters? How balanced is this? Balance is that? And 4th edition to me was all about, okay, we're going to balance everything. And I think either you like that symmetry or that you find that asymmetry, distasteful in a way. I really hate the whole thing of balance, and I hate how everyone is so concerned with balance. It drives me nuts. But it seems to be a part of the modern idea of what the game should be right now, or at least right now it seems to be ingrained. You just can't get away from it, or at least in my discussions online, I can't seem to get away from it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, Todd. I wanted to let you know. I don't mean to keep interrupting you. It's just everything you say is very exciting.
That is one.
I mean, I'm not messing.
Right there.
I'm serious. Like every time you talk, I'm like, oh, that's are good ideas. I want to comment on them.
I'm gonna write that down and post that on my blog.
Hack/Topia support.
There's your quote.
Hack and slash says,
Okay, that was
everything
super
I
awkward
say is
for me.
gold.
Like, not a thing. No, it's fine. And just I wanted to apologize because I keep on feeling like I'm talking over you.
Oh no, I kid. It's all good.
I mean, I think we all get triggered. We just want to jump in and like, yes, or no, you're wrong.
Now I come from more of a board game background, and one of the trends, or not even trends, but basically a lot of the board game players are hungry for more story and more player involvement in the game rather than the game telling them what to do. They're hungry for more exploration. You're seeing I think a bit of a, I won't even call it a surge, but you're seeing a trickle of players moving from that modern board game space into the role playing space now. And what do you think? What do you think that there's going to be a good bridge within board game design and development that will bring RPG players, tabletop RPG players, into the board gaming space that are not already involved, and vice versa? Do you think there's maybe like the unifying role playing system that will entice players from the board game realm into the tabletop RPG realm?
The one thing with Gloomhaven that's really good is that if no one wants to GM, you can play Gloomhaven and you don't need a GM, right? Everybody can play. Everyone can do that. And
yeah, is there even an option for a GM? Like I thought it was all. I didn't realize.
Yeah, I don't think there is. So I'm just. I guess my point was like if you're in a group and you have a bunch of people who don't want a GM, like you get that's why everyone wants to play, nobody wants a GM. You can just break out Gloomhaven and you're good to go.
I wanted to answer Will's question. I'm pretty sure the data shows that there's not any overlap. Wizards of the Coast did a lot of research on that during 3E before the preparation of 4E, and what they found is that Magic players are going to play Magic, and D&D people are going to play D&D, and never the twain shall cross. Like people are into what they're into, and the shared exposure thing doesn't change their purchasing habits. I don't know if that's relevant to what you were talking about, but I think.
Well, I think you're right.
That's changed, hasn't it?
It has changed. Yeah, it has changed significantly within the last 5 years.
I mean, just look at Ravnica and the stuff they've done, and in one of the other Discords that I'm on, like the D&D channel is filled more with stuff about Ravnica and Magic crossovers probably right now than anything else, and it's really excited and energized people. And like I go to my local board gaming store for their board gaming night, and there's a lot of crossover between the role playing game guys who are also playing board games, who are also playing Magic, and I feel like maybe that research at the time of third. A long time ago now was correct at that time, but I think it's a lot different now. I think they recognize
I definitely feel like a grognard, and I feel like the kids are like different, right?
They are.
Keep those kids off my table.
Yeah, the research they did was on me then, right? But now
Right. No,
the
very
new
true.
research is on the millennials, and I guess there's a lot more crossover there. All I can say is that it sounds super great, right? Isn't that good news?
Well, it does. I mean, I use the term bro gamer because it happened within the video game sphere. It hasn't really happened as much in the board game sphere, but I see it happening inevitably. And, there's a chance that, with the bleed and crossover into the tabletop RPG scene, you're going to see some of the same stuff. And I think the epitome of bro gaming within the video game sphere is Fortnite. In the board game sphere, like I said, you don't really see it as much, but there's definitely some games that are emerging that are just like, your average frat dudes are throwing down like this heavy role playing or heavy worker placement game where they would have never done it before. And, entering the space. What are your thoughts or feelings on that? Or have you had any experience dealing with that before?
I mean, I haven't myself, but I see a lot of it. I really like it. I see a lot of diversity in the people who show up, like to the adult gaming nights that I've been to. But I haven't seen one game, I think, that I feel like I've seen somebody who maybe if I was just looking at their surface, like their appearance, I would think was wildly inappropriate. Like, oh, here's this frat guy and he's busting out a feast for Odin or something. Like, I haven't seen that, but I think overall, I have seen a lot of diversity, where you might not think, and I think too, just with the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, the fact that you have actors who have kind of come out publicly as role playing people, whether it's Vin Diesel or Joe Manganiello or I forget the other lady's name from Game of Thrones, who's not Game of Thrones, from True Blood, and also Daredevil, who's going to be
Deborah Ann Woll.
Deborah Ann Woll, I think is her name. Deborah, yeah.
Yeah.
So so I think that makes it gives it a whole lot more accessibility, and like, hey, these are guys who were jocks or they were the pretty girls in school, and they're they're into this hobby. So I think that's great. But I don't have any specific examples myself.
I think my personal experience is it was either play RPGs or Magic the Gathering. I did both, but I never did both at the same time. Like, there just wasn't enough, well, quote unquote, times, whatever I was into at the moment. But these days, I just find RPGs easier to jump into and also more cost effective than the card gaming world these days.
Right.
And board games too. Board games are super.
Board games are expensive as well.
And I think
for what you get out of them, like
that's true.
Yeah, like at per hour cost, board games, video games, role playing games are about the cheapest things you can do, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just that initial cost. Like something like Gloomhaven's $100.
I have Kingdom Death and all the expansions. I'm familiar. There's a cost. Like if you got a hobby, you don't have a hobby to save money.
Right.
I mean, if I had all the disposable income in the world, I'd collect all of these things, but it's normally pick and choose what I'm into at the moment. And at the moment, in the last decade, it's been RPG games. But that's just me.
Yeah, I've been more constant to RPGs. I've never given my heart to another PEX.
Now, you guys, in the realm of the tabletop RPGs, predominantly Dungeons and Dragons within this group. Have you guys explored other systems, or is that a faux pas? Something that
I want to play a game, Will. I want you to name a game that I haven't played, and let's see if you can.
More recently, Pelgrane Press Gumshoe system.
I have played Gumshoe, yes.
Okay. See, I knew you would have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm confused. I think that there's a level of fandom that just enjoys the idea of RPGs, but I play 3 times a week.
I play 2 here.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I played Pathfinder for 2 years, and that was
okay.
I guess you could. I don't know if you want to throw it under the WotC line because it is so close, but yeah.
Yeah, I've played a little Shadows of the Demon Lord. I've played a little Call of Cthulhu. I played a homebrew sci-fi game that a friend of mine was running for 15 years, and I've pretty much played every edition of D&D, at least some. I've always gravitated back towards fantasy, so I guess and D&D is the fantasy system that it's easy for me, and I enjoy it. So I kind of go back, particularly the older versions. So I kind of go back to that a lot. But I'm usually always open to try whatever. I read it. It sounds interesting. I try to get some people to at least try to play it a little bit. Sometimes I can find people to play. Sometimes I can't.
What I want to do, maybe in a few years here, is play some more space-oriented RPGs like Traveler. I want to get into that. I just haven't had the time. I should make the time. I keep saying that and don't have the time.
So what brings you guys back to Dungeons and Dragons at your core? Because it seems that you guys are really, really passionate about Dungeons and Dragons. What is it that pulls you guys individually to the system, the world, everything that you're dealing with in Dungeons and Dragons?
I have an answer for that, but I don't want to. I feel human existence is about living kind of in darkness and fear. Yep. And there's a human story about going out into the unknown, the chaos, conquering it, and bringing something back to civilization. That's sort of the essence of every, a story that's ever about any sort of conflict. It's about human beings going out into dangerous chaos, retrieving treasure, and bringing it back to increase the power of the human species. It's that cycle over and over and over in fiction for I'd say at least 8,000, if not 12,000 years through human history, right? So what you're doing with D&D is you're literally engaging in a shared dream quest where you explore a chaotic unknown, retrieve treasure, and bring it back to make yourself more powerful. It's meaningful to your psyche because your psyche has difficulty differentiating between something that actually happened and something that it just imagined happened because of the way memory works. And because you're doing it in front of other people and you're working together, you can't cheat. So because it's a shared experience, it takes on more value. And this cycle and this story is super powerful and engaging for human beings, which is why when Gary made the game in the 70s and it sold a couple of million copies, it didn't go away because everybody who played it has never stopped thinking about it since. So I think that that's why it's so appealing, and that's why it's always the market leaders, because at its core, it's telling the human story and allowing you to participate in it as a person with actual agency instead of just making meaningless choices throughout your day. That's it. I'm done.
I don't have anything as profound as hack and slash other than it's nostalgia for me. It's what I started with. It's what I have my fond memories with. It's what I keep coming back to and keep making more memories with that same line with the D&D. Yeah, I guess that's my reasoning.
Yeah, I also don't have anything too profound to say. I think as all the things about the kind of stories it creates and sort of the resonance, I definitely feel that those things about kind of and I always felt that was very strong, the idea that sort of Tolkien had, and others too, the idea that as false as it may be, that sort of this that we are on this sort of grading decline, and that there were things greater than us before, and we're trying to sort of live off the scraps of that greatness. That everything that was done before was more powerful than the stuff we have, and therefore it has that value that we're bringing back, kind of the untold riches of lost, which I guess is something that, as Hack and Slash kind of mentioned, is something that's been our pursuit forever, that we always feel like there was some kind of civilization that was greater than we are that we missed. And if we could only go back and pick up their breadcrumbs, maybe what we could do for ourselves.
The ancients.
The ancients, whether it's, Lemuria or Atlantis or, whatever else, or aliens, if you're into the ancient alien stuff, whatever it may be. I think the other thing is, as a system, particularly, going back to the white box or whatever, it's so easy to take and mold and shape into your own with very little fiddling. If I was going to try to make a 5th edition class, to me, you really have to sit with it and try to figure it out. And it's a lot of work to try to make a class. But you go back to 1st edition or before that to the original edition, and it's so easy to take an idea you have, whether it's just a concept you have in whatever world you have, to make that and just spit out a class for it, or spit out a race, a species, whatever. And it's so easy to take and make and use as a base for whatever you like. And I've seen lots of great things that people have made, were hacking it and putting into, and then TSR did it themselves. Let's take it and put it in the Old West. Let's take it and put it in space. Let's take it and do this with it. And it's very flexible in that way. And I really appreciate that. And particularly as time goes on, that flexibility really keeps coming back to me.
I don't have an answer for you because I don't go back to D&D.
What do you go back to? What's your, old game of choice or original game of choice?
I don't really know if I had one. I mean, I've played everything from things like Traveler, to even other like unknown RPGs like Syntheside, or like more recently I've been doing a lot of Fate. Um, I guess I'm in that odd bucket. I mean, I like D&D. I remember getting into. I was first introduced to D&D in 3.5 or 3.0 whenever that had come out, and then I went even back further and played the originals with the people at the time. But even though I like the D&D system, I never really enjoyed the Forgotten Realms, which is kind of fascinating to say, because I think it did feel too Tolkien-esque for me. And even though I love Tolkien, I kind of felt like, I don't know, I feel like I at that time anyway, because I am younger, I had seen so much of that in video games, where I was like, and this is like a totally different experience because everyone else had started, with that nostalgia, and I looked at it from that video game perspective. I was like, well, this is like everything else I've already done. I've already played through, but
What about
through
a board
visual
game or a
settings.
card game?
What was that?
What about a board game or a card game? What's that special game to you?
Um, I don't really know if I have one yet. I mean, to be totally honest with you, I don't think I have one yet.
I mean, I forget when Forgotten Realms took over. Was it third edition? Because it wasn't the original setting. Like Greyhawk.
Yeah, I think it was.
a
Yeah.
very different feel.
It lasted the longest, though, and still does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very popular. I actually don't find it very Tolkien-esque because it's so super high magic, and the Tolkien, Middle Earth, at least in the Third Age, is actually, I think, very low magic. I mean, there's the only kind of magic, very few magic items. Gandalf, very few spells that are tossed around. They're fantastic creatures, obviously, but Forgotten Realms to me is like if sort of third age is kind of this muted colors, like the Forgotten Realms is sort of this almost over bright technicolor with everything exploding and all this kind of magic and everything everywhere. So it's kind of interesting that you find it too Tolkien-esque, because I would say I don't find it very Tolkien-esque at all.
It's got to be
It
the
came out in
happiness.
the 80s, 1980.
Again, I'll tap in a little bit of psychology here, but for any of you, has gaming ever been therapeutic in that? And I'll give you an example for myself. When role playing, it lets me explore aspects of my personality that I can't explore, as a person, within a normal public setting or anything like that. Um, being evil in a way, lying, cheating, things that I don't normally do by character, but it lets me explore those within that within my mind and and share it with a group. Have you guys ever had the same feelings? Has it ever? I mean, obviously, I think most of us, gaming has taken us through difficult parts of our life. I can almost guarantee across the board. But has it ever felt therapeutic to you to play a character or role play?
Absolutely. I mean, I played one character, and the whole campaign was about a heist. I'm never going to do a heist in real life. I don't want to get shot in the face or go to prison. But doing a heist in a game, that is thrilling and exciting, and you get to live out that dream moment. But who doesn't want to be part of a heist? Seriously.
Yeah, I always find it really nice to play character. One funny thing, when I joined this sci-fi game that my friend had been running since high school, and this was already maybe, I don't know, 15 years, post high school. So they're playing. So the other players, except for one guy who was relatively new, but still had been playing for a few years, they were all playing essentially evil characters or neutral. And so I come and asked me, okay, well, what are you going to be? And I said, I'm going to be good. And he goes, are you sure? It's like, everyone else is either neutral or evil. And I said, yeah, no, I'm going to be good. And what I always liked about playing good players is to me, it's an extra challenge, because I think it's easy if you're going to play evil and I'm just going to kill, whatever. But when you have those extra things of being, I have to try to do things this way, where I still want to get things done. I still have the meta player goals of wanting to get the loot and wanting to do everything, but I need to do it and stay within these extra rules. I always appreciated that challenge. So even though I don't have a story of me saying I was in a hard time in my life and I just wanted to be evil, so I did that, I always liked that. You know what? I'm gonna try to that extra challenge. I'm gonna try to be good and see and see what I could do. And in that game, my character, whatever, he ended up thriving in that game. He drove some of the other characters nuts because he would put the kibosh on their evil plots. But to me, that was a big part of what made those characters fun, is that I decided to take that good path despite everyone else going the other way.
And I wouldn't say mechanically it was only like mechanically challenging for you. I think the part of the therapy of that is, you can only be so good in real life as well. I mean, you have to survive. So to be able to bend a game where you're not going to be punished physically or for real, there's no risk of like physical harm unless your players get super angry with you. But you can stretch that being good thing, like you of course you're not a saintly figure in real life, but you could play one in an RPG, which lets you explore that as well.
How dare you? I am absolutely a saint in real life. My halo glows brightly even as we speak.
I'd like to urge some caution. I think I worked in social work for about 2 decades, and it's not a good idea for somebody who isn't trained as a clinician to perform any sort of therapy. So like people can, like obviously explore stuff and it can be its own thing. But I think that there's a danger there of somebody thinking that they're going to teach somebody a lesson we're playing a game. Like I wouldn't find that acceptable if we were playing, Boggle or Yahtzee. I'm certainly not going to find it acceptable just because we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. I think would be my concern, because I've seen that sort of dysfunctional interaction before.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that the DM should take it upon themselves to control the game that way, unless they're a clinician that's trained and are using it as a role playing session as a tool.
Because they do that. They will absolutely use like role taking and role reversal and all kinds of stuff to teach people things, for sure.
Right. I was not going from that standpoint, and I apologize if anybody would take it that way, because you're right. There's a danger in people messing with that to try to help other people, because it does. Obviously, they don't understand the rules, and there are some weird connections that people can form that end up very personal. If you're a trained therapist or clinician, you understand the line, and when that line is being crossed by the patient or yourself, and you know how to step away from that. So yeah, I highly advise as a dungeon master, you don't experiment with that as your group. But I think I'm going from the personal side of it, and at times when I had almost like cathartic experiences through gaming, personally, not that was driven by the DM, but just where I was able to work through some of my own stuff through role playing.
And this will be the PSA episode.
Yes.
I don't know. You're talking about characters, I guess, or if you ever role play different characters. It's weird because I only ever gravitate toward really 3 types of characters. I've only truly ever played a paladin of some kind, or a warlock, which is really funny, or a necromancer. So whenever I get into those mindsets, I don't really ever do the in between. It's either all extremes or nothing, is how I do it. So I don't know. That's my answer.
I played a necromancer once in 3rd edition. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed having my horde of followers that I, throw into combats and then sit in the background and giggle.
Yeah, well, no, right, exactly. But I just think it's always funny because either I'm good, and righteous through judgment with like some kind of paladin character doing the good thing like you were talking about earlier and foiling others' plans, or I'm the complete opposite. And either I'll be extremely evil as like a warlock, or I'll actually make my warlock good, which is funny. So I don't know. Some people always, whenever I do that in games, it always gets that question of why. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, this is kind of why I like to do the rolling in order and kind of taking some of those decisions and letting the dice decide, because it can help kind of push people out of playing the same character over and over again, because you may want to play the paladin or warlock, but you might not get the stats to support it. So you can either try to force it, or you can, try to play something else. And I think sometimes people end up in those ruts when they have so much choice. They just keep playing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I also kind of like to think about it as you're spending in a time in a room with people that you like, your friends. Well, you're becoming like closer, like bonding over the game. I want to fill that with as little awkwardness as possible, and conversations about, well, this is what I think your character should do, or somebody being like, I'm playing out my inner kink or whatever. I like to avoid that in play. Yeah, just because it's like, well, awkward, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that's actually funny. Like there's definitely, I think, some hard and fast rules that most DMs have when you feel that stuff sort of creeping into a play session. How do you address that? I mean, we talked about like the chuckleheads, but how do you address something that's going a little bit too far beyond that personal space within a game?
Assertively.
I love how to the point you are on so many here. Assertively.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I just pretty much say like, come on, man, we're not here for that, or I've been lucky though. I really haven't had that happen, because the times I've joined a group, I remember when I first moved to New York, or moved back to New York City, I was looking for a group and I found one, and one of the things they had me do was, before they made a decision on me and before I made a decision on them, I came and actually just watched them play, a session. And it was good because I could see how they were, see how they played, see if it was kind of my style. And they, of course, were obviously wary of the same thing. Like, is this person going to come and be too, not in the same style? And it worked out fine. And thankfully, I've never been in a situation where people got too, weird with things. But I think my response would be at first is like, I think sometimes people, I'm not into doing the whole, like, let's play out all the sexual. If someone wants to bring a lot of sexual stuff in the game, I'm like, you go carousing and you wake up the next morning and we move on. If someone wants to get more detailed than that, I'm just like, hey man, this is not that kind of game, and if
write in your book.
Yeah, then we just part ways. But I think that's kind of where it comes down to. And I think things, if you're playing a lot of public tables and things, I think you have tools like X cards and things, which are great for ways to make people feel comfortable speaking out, because I don't think you want someone to have to sit through something that they feel uncomfortable with because they don't want to be perceived as making a fuss or feel bad for speaking out about something that they just are not into, because people have a lot of different ideas of what is acceptable. And, particularly in, like I said, public games where you don't necessarily have a lot of time to vet everybody and figure out who everybody is, having a method to allow people to say, like, I'm not good with this is good.
Have any of you ever had an encounter with a player that couldn't separate the character from himself or herself? And I'm not talking about Tom Hanks' crazy mazes and monsters BS, but something to that effect, but less severe.
Oddly, though.
Well, I'm okay. Yeah, I think that happens. I did say, I mentioned earlier, I'd done a lot of social work. I'll be in a room with a bunch of teenagers and half of them will be sexual offenders or whatever, and one of them will start doing something completely inappropriate. After years of doing that, I've gotten very direct about inappropriate behavior, right? You're like, no, somebody needs to address that right now, and everybody else, we're not going to, so like at the table when it happens, I do the same thing. Like I've had to explicitly address people talking over other people and point out that their behavior is inappropriate. I just stop the play and I address it with the person, and then, we're adults. These aren't kids who haven't been socialized or who are victims. You're dealing with a group of other adults, and by definition, an adult should be able to handle that. As far as getting tied into your character, I've seen it happens with a lot of people when they feel that they're being disrespected, and then they get very upset, and that can escalate a situation.
I just want to say, Hack and Slash, I would love to be a part of one of your games at one point, even if it's just like a one-shot.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some stuff online and Twitch, and I'll put out some information on my social media about that when that happens. So if people are interested, they should follow.
Amazing. I'm kind of interested. Like, so Hack and Slash, you're definitely a passionate individual within the game sphere. What like I'm gonna sort of what drives you? What what really got you into all this? And I mean, if this has been discussed in other podcasts, then obviously we can cut that out. But what drives you in what you do within the D&D sphere?
A sincere desire to continue to live indoors.
I'm right there with you.
Money.
I think that just checked off everybody's boxes here too.
I'm sorry. I don't really have an answer for you. It has a lot to do with the fact that I enjoy fantasy worlds, because reality is very overwhelming. So I think there's the mental illness component is definitely a part of that. It was also something I shared a lot of time with my father. Like he played D&D and we spent a lot of time together. So it feels very comfortable to me. And as a child, I was immersed in the literature. Like I spent hours looking at the Player's Handbook and Russ Nicholson pictures and Tampier and Otis and all the great artists and writers. And as an adult, just the opportunity to participate in that makes me very thankful. That's
So essentially, you're doing what you love at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I like it.
Do you have like a topic that you want us to sort of like write out? Like, is there anything that you would want us to discuss?
No. That's super awkward, dude. We have I don't know. No, we have the itinerary. I'm good with that. Oh my goodness.
We have talked about sales.
Oh, we have not. Money.
We have talked about sales.
Sales time.
Well, I could say I made 60 cents off the RPG Breakfast Club in Coast to Coast. Thank you, Anchor.
How are you guys increase sales? Like, what's the secret to that? Anybody have that answer? Because if somebody has that's what I want to know.
That's Munchie right there. That's why he used to get the little chuckle.
Yeah, I do. I know how to increase sales.
Well, tell us, Munchie, tell us.
He's keeping it all for himself.
It's funny because I actually just did a live stream about this Saturday night. So last night, and I'll just kind of actually, because that's all fresh in my mind, I'll reiterate what I had said on that live stream. People, especially modern day, so millennials, we'll talk about them for a second because this is going to get into demographics. So I guess by demographic terms, I'm apparently a millennial, which is kind of interesting to me because I feel like I'm in my 90s, especially after 4 kids. But when you talk about the millennial crowd and you talk about that sense of demographic, most of them want a very different experience than what a lot of the older generations, and even what I actually grew up with because of my family, they're the same way. And there's a lot of wanting story, and like that's a natural thing. Everyone wants story, everyone wants all these things. But the one thing they don't want is the same thing rehashed, and you get that a lot. You see a lot of that in a lot of any forum post, any Reddit, if you want to go peruse Reddit, which is kind of a scary place. Reddit's all about that, and that would be your demographic, for example, of the millennials. But then you also have like Facebook, Twitter, anywhere in social media, you'll see people going, I don't want to play the same rehashed game over and over and over again. They want something new. And I had talked about recently Saturday night about how worlds that come out, the worlds are what attract people. And there are 2 ways to build a world. Either you're going to build a world purely on passion, and that's what you like as a player, as a person, for your game, or you're going to build a world that actually sells. And you're going to build a world that people will buy into. And this is something that, as someone who does marketing professionally amongst UX and all that other fun stuff, they are going to purely be looking at what you have in your world. So if you have another half orc you have a halfling, you have a high elf, you have a dwarf, and this is all fantasy. Main race is human. You got something like a drow. They're not going to be looking at your game. More than likely, they're going to be looking at D&D, right? um, but it's a little deeper than that. In that world, they want something very unique, very different, which is actually why something fascinating lately is that more sci-fi games have actually been getting bought. And it's funny that Pex mentioned Traveler, because that's kind of where a lot of people within that crowd are gravitating toward, because they feel that sci-fi can be expanded upon more. And I took the challenge into my own hands to say you're wrong, to a lot of that crowd, and I said no, fantasy can very much be expanded into something more than just this universe, which is why I describe the Forgotten Realms as Tolkien-esque, because it's been compared to that way by that same crowd. And I took it in my own hands, and I created Paths, World of Adia, and everything in that world. I mean, we don't even have goblins; they don't even exist in there, and that always throws people off. Or like our tropes are completely, gone. I flipped them on their head. People will be like, "Wow, that's really interesting," which is fascinating when you look at that demographic, because that generation that's next coming up behind the millennials, Generation Z. Kids essentially, they're Will mentioned the bro gamer, right? The Fortnite video game player, and they're not even looking at any of this yet. They will, and when they do, they're going to start exploring these things. And right now, if you've noticed, 5e, for D&D, and I'm going to only use 5e as an example, they've been moving into things like D&D Beyond, right? And they have these mobile applications and things like that. And you have the Twitch streamers, and you have a lot of this modern stuff happening right now. And you're having kids watch this. And some kids are getting into it either through their family or through friends that they know. And what's fascinating is that when they do get into it, I'll see a lot of posts, like a lot of my good friends, they'll say, how come my kid doesn't want to play D&D with me? How come all this happening? And I said, well, because you're giving them something that you experienced as nostalgia, and while they enjoy that, they aren't making their own memories, and that's something to think about too. So, which is why they'll turn back to video games like Fortnite, because Fortnite's brand new. It hasn't really been done before, and that's kind of that psychology behind it. Is because it hasn't been done before. They want their own memory. They want to prove themselves. And in this situation, that's actually exactly why when you build a new world and you want things to sell well, even if you have an old world and it's still classic, the number one thing you absolutely want to do is make sure you can sell a new memory. And that's actually the secret, to be honest with you. Selling a new memory, more than just an old storytelling, but making it theirs and not making it someone else's, if you know what I mean. That was a lot.
It was very good, though. I do have a question. Taking something old and making it new, does it have any selling value? And I'll use your Dark Elf example. Let's say instead of the gray or the black and the white hair, they're orange and have blue hair. Is that something new, or is it the same rehash? It wouldn't sell.
That's not new, man. People aren't dumb.
They may not have exposed to it before.
Like, that's just a pink elf. Everybody knows the Eldar are elves. Nobody is confused about that.
Well, right, but
Okay,
put a
rainbow
new twist.
color.
Like put a new twist on it. So maybe they transmorph into something else during a different phase, or they have the will to be able to change into something else. You give them a new spin beyond just the initial visual appeal or the visual change. That's against the trope of a dark elf. So you can't just reskin it and say this is not a drow, it's a fluorescent happy elf. But then it does all the same things a drow does. You have to make it something that's not what it initially was, beyond a reskinning.
Yeah. So for example, you can't do like elves in space like the Eldar. Something pretty fascinating that we're doing, for example, I'm taking a spin on elves, so we're bringing them up for an example. My elves are essentially like Vikings, they're large enough to where they can rip things in half. They're very barbaric. They take the persona of an orc, of what an orc is. So elves are not your beautiful, or even dark elves. They're not thin and slender. They still got the pointy ears, but it looks like Hallstad just got off the ship and he's about to put your skull through a wall or something. And that's our elves. Where our orcs are the complete opposite. They're more like humans. Now, if you really wanted to take something else unique, like what we're doing with dwarves, we have our standard dwarf trope. They're the tiny Scottish man who's, having their way with their beard. But I have another spin on that, and actually we have a race called coursers, and coursers are they're people that can shapeshift between their courser canine type form into a human form. Now that's been done. However, the difference is the humans in the world that I've been building, they're basically defects. They're the lowest on the totem pole, and they're treated like savages. But then our dwarves, I have another race of dwarves that also have that coarser form that can shapeshift. You don't really see that in a dwarven trope. That's very different. So, and that's kind of what Will's saying. So if you're going to take an elf like that, you don't want to reskin it. You want to make that elf into something completely different and just very, like a halfling elf. That would be pretty interesting. Or halfling in a sense. Maybe they have a different thing about them. Who knows? You can do so much with it, but it's exploring that creativity and not just reskinning, essentially.
I feel like this could be its own show on its own.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, so taking classics, definitely. I mean, classics are still very much a thing, and we enjoy them. Obviously, it's not that we don't enjoy them. It's just play the classics and have fun with it, and also have the things that give people new memories and make them those their own. Because like how all of us here, we're chatting about old D&D, you fall back to those things. These kids, they have nothing to fall back to. Not yet, anyway. It's coming though.
And I'll take what Sean Swanshi's saying, and sort of expand on it. The things we know from literature like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and the things that have formed sort of the more modern fantasy, they came from Old Norse legends and old ancient world legends, but they weren't what those legends originally were. They were something that was morphed into it by these authors. So, I mean, if Tolkien and C.S. Lewis just rewrote the legends of yore, it wouldn't have been consumed like it was, and it wouldn't have led to D&D, because D&D was a take on Tolkien. It was this evolution of storytelling that changed with generations and tied it into a look at an encapsulation of society as we experienced it. So if you're doing the same thing now with your storytelling when in the worlds you're creating or the modules you're creating off of the base systems, and you're doing something just a little bit different that changes the way that story was told, but gives that familiar sense of, hey, I know what this is, but it's different enough that I want to explore this, and that's what you want to do to sell now.
Right.
Yeah, I think getting back to actual gaming, I think it's important to not just build worlds that you want to play in, but your players as well. I have a 4-year-old, and I want to start kind of role playing with her and seeing if she likes it. But one of the things that I want to do is not have her play in the game that I want to play, but try to find the game that she wants to play. The kind of things that the adventures she'd like to go on, the kind of character she wants to do, and then do that. So I think that will get her into the game, not just, hey, let's play the old Tolkien stories that Dad likes to play. Let's do, if she likes My Little Pony, let's do a My Little Pony adventure if that's what she wants. And then the system really isn't so important then, right? Because then it's all about just whatever we come up with to facilitate those stories.
Yeah, and actually, that's a great example. So I just put a link in chat talking about Trifaldi. So you're talking about your 4-year-old here, and that's exactly what I do with my kids too. I said, hey kids, what do you want to play? And they made that link I just put in there is their world. And I had an artist go through and do their own renditions of whatever they wanted to make. And I was like, let's do it. They ended up in this like strange Candyland world. and like you have gumdrop goblins, and then they have like baby gumdrop goblins called goblins, and the goblins are poisonous to noodle dragons. So like that's kind of what they created. And who
Please tell
knows?
us more. Just please keep going.
It's just such a fascinating world. They have like, and then they made like, because you mentioned My Little Pony, right? So that's my second daughter. She loves those. So she made this like unicorn race of people, but they're not really people. They're still like Pegasus unicorns. And and then my oldest daughter, now she loves elves, so she made like this moon elf thing, and then these rainbow elves. And then my son, being into dinosaurs, he's like, I just want to be a dinosaur with like a jet cannon on my back, and I want like chicken nugget grenades. I'm like, cool, let's make it happen. so so that's what we started doing. And whenever they throw the chicken nugget grenades, they explode with like these sprinkles, and it just like penetrates their enemy and kills them. It's fascinating what they've done, but that's exactly it, right? And I don't know, right? What y'all were saying? What world do they want to play in? So
I want to kill a noodle dragon. That's all I want to know or do right now.
we'll roll up your gumdrop goblin, and we'll go kill a noodle dragon.
Sweet. All right. Well, we're getting to that promote our stuff time. Who would like to go first?
Oh man, I like to promote my things.
Do it.
Okay,
Tell us how to give you money.
Yes, yeah. Oh, there's a lot of ways. I made it very convenient for everyone, so be sure and check that out. I run the blog Hack and Slash. I broadcast on Twitch as Egonarch Artist. I'm a working writer and illustrator. I'm available for commissions. And I have a storefront on Lulu and a storefront on Drive-Thru RPG. I write about classic gaming and how to have fun with your friends. Be sure and check it out and support me on my goal of continuing to live indoors. Thank you.
Todd, you want to go next, or do you want me to go?
Oh, sure. I'm Todd. I help out here at the tavern, and I also run a blog called Hex Press, and I also publish videos to YouTube. I'll drop a link to the YouTube channel since the blog is under a little bit of construction. And yeah, I have a Patreon if you want to support me in that way. And social media stuff and all that is linked into various places.
I am Pex, Tavern Custodian, also help out at the tavern here. If you'd like to support the tavern directly, you could go to Tinker Tavern's Patreon. Here's the link for that. And if you'd like to support these amazing breakfast clubs and coast to coast, you can go here and subscribe and give me money, which would be fantastic. And there's a link for that.
All right, I guess I'll go next. I'm Smunchy, so I've been the one who's randomly talking about sales. I have actually a Kickstarter coming up April 23rd for a game called Paths Roll to Vidia. It's an RPG. We have a few different things in it, from classic Game Master play to actually a Game Master in a box with a card deck.
Please put some holes in there so we can breathe.
I will put some holes in there. You can check out the link there. That has the elves in there that I was talking about. It has the orcs, all that fun stuff. April 23rd is when the Kickstarter launches. And then smunchygames.com. Your turn, Will.
So yeah, Will Esgro. Also go by Happy Fun Time Live. I stream across various Twitch channels right now. I stream on Geekspiel, Twitch TV, Geekspiel. Sometimes stream on Happy Fun Time Live. Usually it's convention stuff that I stream with that. And then I'm on Time to Tabletop for RPG play. I'm also games director at Smunchy Games and working on developing all of the IPs that Smunchy keeps birthing from his beautiful mind.
Amazing. Now I will unmute the audience for our Q&A time. And strangely enough, all our audience members today are designers and makers only. They're going to be our worst critics, aren't they?
Sure.
I'm excited.
All right, you are all unmuted, so fire away.
They still look muted.
Well, some of them are muted on their side. They're unmuted on the server side. Except Tinkar, but he knows how to unmute that.
I really want nachos right now. Sorry.
Can you turn that into a question? Nachos sound good.
What kind of nachos? There you go.
Chicken nachos with sour cream, guacamole. That sounds really good.
Melkor typed out in chat that he doesn't want us hearing his children destroying things in his house, but he did state, if only I had a tabletop RPG for 7 to 8 year old girls.
Didn't Monty Cook publish No Thank You Evil? I believe that's an RPG targeted at that age group.
I think I'll just hack the white box into a My Little Pony. You know, the game Friendship is Magic, the RPG.
And you guys know that there's a clone of Pathfinder called Pony Finder, like for
I do.
Yeah, it's a thing. You can buy it. It exists.
No, I had no idea. I'll have to check it out.
Melkor just said, "Yeah, not that."
No, you don't want to play it with kids. It's Pathfinder, but with ponies. It's for adult males. It's not a kids game.
Oh, I see. I'll pass then.
Yeah.
There is a My Little Pony RPG though. That one that you mentioned. That's actually a good one. I have played that with my 6-year-old. Well, she's going to be 7 now. 7-year-old daughter. So she won.
The Pathfinder one?
No. There's an actual My Little Pony RPG. It's more like a kind of like a choose your own adventure thing, but
is it the Tales of Equestria?
Yeah, I think that's it. I have to go back and look. She holds the book all the time, so.
There's the link for that. So there you go, Melkor. You'll be playing My Little Ponies before you know it.
That's another reason why we're doing Trifaldry those for kids.
Melkor just said, I gave them bats, told them they were swords, locked them in a room, and told them to LARP. And that's why everything's being destroyed, Melkor.
Parenting at its finest.
Yep.
Explains the war zone.
Yeah, that reminds me of a time we were gaming at a guy's house, and he had a couple of kids, and he had the kids go into another room. And we said, "Oh, where are the kids playing?" He's like, "They're playing in the knife room." I said, "You put your kids to play in the knife room?" He's like, "Yeah, they're fine." He's like, "Okay."
Just tell them all the guns are up. They can't get up there. I mean, you guys are laughing, but there were firearms available in every house and everywhere I went my entire youth. It's very common to me.
Oh, I love it.
My youngest is 11, and he's allowed to go into the room with the guns in it because it's also our wargaming room, but he's not allowed to take random friends in there.
You can't fight here. This is the war room.
It's one of the best lines in cinema.
Yes, it is. It's one of my favorite movies.
It's a good film.
Yeah, I think what surprised me about that film when I first saw it was it just seemed to me it was so ahead of its time in the humor and everything. I was just like, I couldn't believe that they were doing this and how long ago it was. It really kind of opened my eyes to sort of a lot of things that I thought were more recent.
I think if you transplanted back to any period in human history, and I based this on my research from Latin in college, you would find people have almost identical complaints, even with radically different cultures.
Yep.
Like the Romans would complain about kids not paying attention in class and singing popular songs and not respecting the teachers, and complain that everybody wants to write a book, and like it's very frustrating because it's normal. It's the same thing. It's been for about 12,000 years.
I'm a little bit far from my monitor, so I can't read if there are other questions or not. happening.
No, we're just complaining about Hawk the Slayer or encouraging Hawk the Slayer.
Not complaining about Hawk the Slayer. They said they corrected not to now. Please, Pex.
Oh, Hawk the Slayer is kind of fun, but you gotta go crawl all the way. Well, Dragon Slayer I feel like is the number one 80s kind of old school fantasy movie, but I really have a soft spot for Crawl. I feel like Crawl gets
Excalibur. Excuse me. Did you
Excalibur is
mispronounce
good, but
Excalibur?
Well, I'm talking really more fantasy.
Will says nay, sir. Nay.
Excalibur is excellent as well.
Sorry, real quick, Melkor does ask a question to Smunchy. How much are you guys developing tabletop simulator versions of our games? I can go ahead and take that heavily.
Going ahead. Yep.
Heavily. We have right now our main implementation is for Temple of Ukar-Ka, which is a board game that takes place within the space of Path's World of Adia. And I don't know, is that still? I mean, actually, we're using Tabletop Simulator exclusively to playtest our games right now. We do have physical prototypes that we've been working along, but Tabletop Simulator allows us to not have to worry about the overhead of prototyping until we feel that we're confident that it's time to actually make the physical pieces to bring to a physical table.
Yeah, it's true, and that's for all games. That includes all RPGs.
Yes.
So Pat's World of Adia is on that's tested on Tabletop Simulator. Ukar-Ka, Rift Shifters, all the Rift Shifter stuff we're doing. Trifaltree, I mean, we'll be working that in right now. That's a physical prototype with my children only because it's their world. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I actually prefer Tabletop Simulator at the end of the day, just because I feel, even though it's kind of clunky at times, there's a lot you can do with it.
Hack and Slash, do you do anything in the virtual tabletop sector at all? Or have plans to?
Well, yeah. Because I want to make money, I offer all my artwork in HD 600 DPI format for use in play for people using virtual tabletops.
Oh, cool. So like tokens and props and stuff. Neat.
Well, I design a lot of adventures, and so it's mostly the adventure maps. Members of my Patreon get access to the HD stuff, and it just allows you to drop it right in as a backdrop to Roll20 or whatever, and you can explore the actual image.
I may be sending you some money.
yeah,
I hope so. I mean, that is definitely my trajectory. That's what I want. So that sounds appealing to you guys. You should check out some of my art.
Definitely.
Follow-up question from Melkor. Are we going to continue that into our finalized products or just for playtesting? I think that is more up in the air right now, Sean. Yeah?
Yeah, we're unsure right now.
We're unsure because implementations in Tabletop Simulator sometimes inherently aren't as good as what's going to be on the physical tabletop. So we're examining that. We're also examining other digital implementations. And as we grow, possibly building a digital development team to build digital implementations outside of Tabletop Sim, pretty much being in and of themselves an app or something similar. Next question from Das Machine. Also for Sean Smunchy, did you find it challenging developing a game and the mechanics while also building a specific world setting in the same game? And how did you know that you had enough setting for an initial game release? Oh wow, that's actually excellent. Do you want me to start with that and you can?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there is an internal struggle there. So straight up front, all of the ideas and the lore were built by Sean. Going back about 15 years. So this started with doodling in his like notebooks and stuff, and coming up with ideas that had developed into the world of Adia and all these other IPs that he's Rift Shifters. And then the challenge there is because Sean hired on designers to, or at least contracted designers to turn his vision into a game. So a lot of designers, the challenge there is you have to take the idea of what it is and then simulate it via mechanics. So that happens within the role-playing sphere, in the way you handle dice, the way you handle battle phases and everything like that. So a system had to be designed around what Sean was looking for. Um, the same thing goes for the board games. The idea is there, the story is there, and the lore. It starts from there. At least what we do at Smunchy, it all starts from there, and then what we build from that in games is usually independent designers, and then my role as game director is to partner with the designers and Sean and make sure that the vision is one to one. Because what often ends up happening is Sean, the creative force, says, "I want X, Y, Z," and then the designers go and run with it, but in their own head, how that would be implemented. And sometimes that doesn't translate one to one until 3 or 4 months into the design, and then Sean has a conversation. He's like, "Oh wait, you did that? I don't know if that's going to work." so again, where I sort of step in with the games director or developer role is I make sure that both sides of it are on the same page throughout the process, so that we're not wasting time in design and development. And I think Sean knew that he wanted to go into making a game, and then he partnered with passionate designers to create those systems. So the evolution was Sean had the idea, he just wanted it out. He knew it was time to get that out in the world. Then he reached out to designers, and then it turned into something more solid. And his artists, that those little doodles he was drawing became actual pieces of art that enriched the world. And then from there, and that's where Sean does it a little bit backward, because most game design, both in board games and I think within the RPG space, it's all done in storytelling. Then the art's almost the last feature. He pretty much started with art, which has actually been really great for developing, because it lets both the writing team and the design team get a better physical idea of what the creatures are and what the races are like up front. But it's a bigger cost up front. So Sean was lucky enough to have the funds to be able to sort of spark that himself, and then the passion followed.
That's a pretty good overview. Um, yeah, no, I mean exactly, and that's been kind of the big thing. Is Will's right. I definitely do things backwards, and I do it backwards on purpose. While I think it's fascinating, and to be fair, I think I have the opportunity to do it backwards. Meaning, essentially, not everyone has that opportunity. Now, for me, when I do have like that 15 years worth of like lore, I mean, I think we're going on 16 years now. Jeez, total. Kind of going through that and like doing those different games, like having a board game in the same realm as the RPG. What I had done is I had taken a small piece of that world for the board game and said, hey, this is what I want. I want a dungeon crawling type of experience here, but for board gamers, because I also have there's also a lot of business strategy behind it too. So while I am very passionate about my games and I'm passionate about my world, I want to take the board game and pull those people into the RPG realm. Because I really feel that's something that these players want. So while you could call it Gloomhaven Light, essentially, for these players, because that's kind of what they're used to, slowly and gradually we'll transition them into the RPG world. And then from Adia, I like to actually recommend other RPGs. I'll say, hey, you should go and check this out and go do these things. But that was kind of the business strategy behind it. But that's even from that lore, that world building perspective with game mechanics. Because Will's exactly right. We've had those moments where someone will go and develop something. One of the designers, I think we have like 5 or 6 on the team, and something will come up like spirit magic, for example. And the way spirit magic works in Adia is very different than a lot of other realms and games that most have played in. Yet it's still familiar. It's familiar enough. So what ends up happening is that designer will have a vision in their mind, and they're going to go and run with it. And then they come to find out, oh, that's actually not how some of these things work, because of the tropes that I was talking about earlier. When you break those tropes, it also makes it to where even your designers and your writers have to start thinking differently. Because, for example, we have this thing in Paths where someone will say, okay, well, why can't you just kick down the door? And they go, I can't, I'm an orc. And they're like, what? Because an orc isn't actually physically strong in Adia like an elf. So when you come at it from that angle, one, the writer instantly goes, wow, I'm not familiar with that, now I have to understand it. And the game designer goes, okay, wow, I need to actually change the mechanics on like half of these things. So that's kind of one of the things we've ran into a lot. And Will, I guess you can kind of testify for some of that too, going into that. But I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and the second part that he has there is, how do you know that you had enough setting for the initial game release? The funny thing is, we Sean and I talk about world building, and we're going to be doing some streams on it in the near future. He actually does a live stream now where they're building the world from scratch. But everybody starts world building from a different standpoint. And Sean started with a character, so he had one character in mind when he started Adia, and then developed that world from that single character. So hey, what does this character do every day? What's his family like? Where does he live? And then from there it became a village, and from that village became a jungle, and then that jungle needed tension. So what was fighting this person? And then, oh wait, now there's another race, and oh my god, this race has a history. And then he built out that history and lore, which became the War of Tusk and Feather, which you'll if you become acclimated to his lore, you'll be able to find out. Essentially, elephants fighting parrots, Paradisians and the Tuskar race go to war with each other, and then from that branched out. But wait, okay, if this is happening, what led to that war? And then another race was spawned, and then another race to counteract that race. And I think when it really hit you, Sean, what would you say was the moment that hit you that, okay, this is ready, this is baked and ready to be something in and of itself?
I would say essentially when I had started from that character and it just kept on going out, is when I actually had really the first continent set, which was Mavaden. And because of that continent and the way that was formed and created, there were so many little things in there. Like when people go and look at the map, they're like, that's not how rivers work. It's like, well, yeah, there's a reason why. There's no towns next to waters. Why? Well, there's a reason why. When I had all of those little niche things, which I mean, honestly, that's why it took so long, right? 15 years going down the line. And while I have the other continents also set up too, it's that particular one I needed to make sure I could also tell a story at the same time as supply a game, which I know that seems a little vague to say, how did I know? But the truth is of this matter, I didn't know until I validated it. And that goes into marketing and business and other things like that. But the validation, to be completely honest with you, is by total accident, because Paths as a world was never supposed to be published. I actually had friends stumble upon it, and they were digging through my own stuff without my permission. And as they were digging through it, they were like, you need to publish this. And I was like, why? And they're like, you just need to. And I was like, okay. And then I started getting more encouragement. And then all of a sudden I have, 30, 40 people going, can we please play in this world? And I was like, sure, I guess, we can see what happens and go from there. So that's kind of when essentially, is when you have it validated.
Right. And the ones, so John has that history, or has he has experience within marketing and UX, so he was able to go through validation through research. Now, not everybody's going to be privy to that. So when is obviously going to be a different point for everybody else. I think honestly, the trigger for you was your wife, wasn't she? She was like, go do this now.
Well, I mean, and she helped co-create it, and I mean, it is definitely good to have that support too, because she goes, I want to make all these creatures. I'm like, okay, and she goes, but I really think you should do this, and I was like, all right. So maybe support structure is also another way of how I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a great question. That was also really long. Sorry, everyone.
No, you're fine. I do got two questions. One for you, Todd. You said you were relaunching your YouTube channel?
No, the
very beginning.
Still going. My blog. I'm just redesigning my blog.
Oh, you're just doing a redesign. Gotcha. And my second question is to the Smunchy gang here. How big of a team do you guys have?
I mean, if you go with where it started, I mean, it started with just you and your wife and your brother-in-law, right, Sean?
Yeah, that's right.
And that was how many years ago?
Yeah, God, 10.
Okay,
10,
so that was 10
11.
years ago. About 8 or 9 months ago, it was 3 designers, about 3 artists, and a not a copy editor, just a grammar editor on staff, sort
And
of,
illegal guys.
and legal guys, yeah, and a legal team.
Yeah.
Within the last 9 months, we now have 5 designers, 6 or 7 writers.
Yep.
And 8 artists.
I just signed on another, so we have 9.
9 artists. So when the passion really started rolling with a lot of people, it became this almost collaborative passion, and through various networking that we've been a part of, we've grown to a team of what is that about now? Almost 20 people.
20, yeah, 22, something like that.
Yeah, and almost all of it's contract. So, and more. What's not contract isn't the word. What's the consultation? What would you designate that as?
Freelance, contract to hire. Yeah.
Right. So it's not like we're under the Smunchy banner as a corporation. There's a lot of freelance people part of the team now, but we've been growing pretty quickly as we ramp up initial release and then any subsequent releases. But it's been great because no one in the team, because of that nature of it, no one in the team is beholden to any one project. So as we develop other IPs and as we're developing other projects alongside of what we're doing as our main project right now, we allow these people to sort of like raise their hand and say, "Whoa, I want a piece of that," and it really lets us drive the passion toward production, which is kind of the key to what we see as the key to what will eventually be our success.
Yep, absolutely.
I hope that helps answer that.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Seems like you guys like double every week. It's amazing.
You're telling me. I didn't jeez. I didn't expect so much so fast. So that's for sure.
Just like rabbits.
Yeah, pretty much. I have turned into a rabbit. And I did link the Twitch there too, in the case, because Will had mentioned we were doing a world building stream, which that's what we're doing. I'm actually building a world from scratch with Twitch, with the people who are just in the Twitch channel, and they're contributing. It's actually a lot of fun.
And you didn't plug it. You didn't really talk about. There is a Patreon tied to it right now.
Oh yeah. I guess.
And what you can do is you can sign up for the Patreon, and basically you could be a part of every one of those streams. You don't have to be on the Patreon to be a part of the streams, but if you are on the Patreon at the $5 level, at the end of those world building sessions, you collectively would have built a world, and there will be a PDF created, artwork and inline, all edited out, that you can implement into. It's going to be more of like a skeleton to implement into any system you want to implement it into. Fate, D20, you name it, you'll be able to implement these worlds that are being built into them. But after those different stream sessions you're a part of and actively building in the world collectively, if you're a Patreon, you get a PDF copy of that at the end of it.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm enamored with your elephant genie there.
Oh, the necromancer? Yeah, he's fun.
That is the character that started it all.
Yep, that's him, Nikenta. He was the first character.
I'm still looking for the dragon noodle somewhere hidden in here. Or the noodle dragon.
Oh, that one's in Trifaltree. Unfortunately, you may not find it in that one.
Say that. I know it's an Easter egg.
You know me too well, Pax, already. That's funny.
All right. Does anybody want to say anything before we end the club today?
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'd like to thank all the heroes and wonderful people who are going to make themselves happy by donating and buying my products.
Yes.
Thank everybody for their time. It was a good time. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we got up early, but these talks are always interesting. Especially when hack and slash is around.
Yeah, I might take a nap later, to be honest with y'all.
I'll be streaming in a few hours, probably by 1. So if anybody wants to check out some of my art, I think today actually we're drawing traps. So we're gonna honor Steve Crompton with a little of that. So if you guys are around in a couple hours, come check out Twitch.
That's all on Twitch?
Yeah, I'm gonna get some lunch, and then I'm just gonna come back and start streaming in about 2 hours. So yeah.
Sweet.
Agonarch Artist on Twitch. I posted the links up above, so I'll be doing that. You guys have a good day. I'm going to take off.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Courtney.
Now I'm sad he's gone. All right, guys. I'm going to take off myself. It was a good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
the good talk, everyone. I'm going to spend some family time with the rest of the Sunday and get back to it.
I need food. You guys are free to ping me, though, whenever. So.
Yep. Peace.
All right. Bye, guys.